Today's episode is episode 192 of Unconventional Humans podcast. Today's episode is called The Serious Men. Today's episode, inspired by a few things, inspired by Simone de Beauvoir. She started talking about the serious men in her book, The Ethics of Ambiguity. I'm going to talk about the serious men in a way that's not related to what Simone was talking about. But I was recently watching a TED Talk from Adam Driver, the actor, the American actor. He's in a number of different films. I think he's quite well known today. I watched Marriage Story, him and Scarlett Johansson. I enjoyed that movie. It deals with a breakup of a marriage. I enjoyed it because, enjoyed it. I don't know if that's even the right word, but I appreciated the movie because of just the depth of emotion that Adam can bring to a character. He's got a very strong presence, and I felt that as well from watching the TED Talk. He doesn't mince his words. He seems to be very strong in what he's saying. There's a vulnerability to him that's there, and there's also a no-nonsenseness to him both things that I appreciate. And so it got me thinking about the fact that Adam could be perceived as a serious man by a lot of people. By people who don't so much appreciate the vulnerability and the no-nonsense approach that someone like him can bring to life to cut through the noise. So it got me thinking about being serious, because that's something that I found challenging growing up. That's why I'm doing this episode today, because I found that something that was challenging growing up is something that I actually needed. There are feelings in that experience that I needed to go deeper into and not actually steer away from in the name of conformity to the people who are giving me feedback that it was something that I needed to change about my character. So it's a very subtle thing to grow up in a world where you've got feelings you're dealing with which feel there's a heaviness to them, and there's a depth to them, and there's a darkness to them and a bit of anger to them that you don't fully understand why they're there, why you're feeling these feelings. But the fact is they're a valid part of your reality, of your experience, and just because it's not visible doesn't mean it doesn't exist. So growing up, it was a confusing time for me to be feeling these feelings, not fully knowing why I was feeling these feelings, and then getting feedback from an environment that is basically sending you the message you need to change, because that's not what they're feeling right now. So there's a lack of putting yourself in the shoes of somebody else that they could be feeling a different way to. So watching Adam's talk got me thinking about the fact that these feelings are needed. If you're going to have some sort of depth to your personality, if you're going to actually talk about things of a serious nature, you need to actually feel these things. Otherwise, I think what happens is you've got somebody who won't even talk about things that are of a serious nature, that have serious implications to people, or they will talk about them in a dismissive way, talk about them in a way where they're trying to bring a bit of lightheartedness to something that isn't supposed to have lightheartedness to it. So Adam's talk got me to appreciate that if there are feelings going on within you that are authentic to you, yet you don't know why you're feeling them, and your feedback from your environment is to ignore those feelings, change yourself, then Adam's talk for me, and my own experience with writing and podcasting, would say to ignore the feedback from the environment and to actually validate your own experience, validate your own feelings. Because I found when I gave in to the feedback in the environment around me, and when I tried to suppress those feelings and ignore them, it only made me more resentful of the people around me and the life I was living. I felt disconnected from myself when I was ignoring those feelings. And I know today that me looking at it as a positive thing is actually helping me to connect more with my own authentic voice, my own way of seeing things, because what's happening is that I'm accepting feelings that don't feel good to me, and I don't know where they're going to lead me. But at least I know that those feelings are authentic to me. They're not something that I'm mimicking, because it's not something I would choose to mimic if I had the choice. So this video today is if you're somebody who's struggling through this, if you've got a serious nature to you, then this podcast is to validate those feelings. There's nothing wrong with you. Like, in my opinion today, it's better to be a truer version of yourself than a fake version of yourself. You'll have even though it's a struggle to kind of go against the grain, go against the crowd that's around you sometimes, it's better than to fake your life. Because the other thing I noticed from when I was growing up, and maybe people sometimes giving me that feedback and I'm a bit too serious, the thing I noticed was that what I resented was that I could be in a situation where people are laughing and joking, and I mightn't laugh along to something, and you're getting the feedback then that you're too serious, you should be laughing. So you're getting told what is supposed to be funny, how you're supposed to feel, how you're supposed to engage with the situation. And what I found is that when you start faking those things, you start to lose an actual authentic sense of joy, what that actually feels like, in the name of conformity. And so I think what you start turning yourself into is somebody who believes in the picture of happiness rather than the felt experience of happiness. So you're somebody who is going to social situations, you've got the pictures around you of what a joyful setting should look like, yet it doesn't match how you feel on the inside. And because you've chosen, or you've been encouraged to invalidate how you really feel about things, you think there's something wrong with you because of the disconnect between the pictures that look like what happiness should be and how you actually feel. So this podcast is about, I've been going through that journey, and what I've gradually been discovering, it hasn't been easy, is that it's better to choose what you really feel than how you think you should feel and how you think certain emotions should look like. So I think it's a process. It takes time. It's not a binary thing to either validate your own feelings or validate the environment you're in. It's taking into consideration nuance. I think kindness, genuine kindness from people actually plays a huge part in this. Don't so much take to heart the feedback from people who tell you how you should feel, because chances are at some point in time they've picked up the belief that things should look a certain way, and they've chosen to put more weight on how things look rather than how they feel. So I wouldn't take on board their feedback so much. I would take on board the feedback of somebody who I feel there's like a kindness and there's an empathy to them. If they're giving you feedback, sincere feedback, those are the type of things now I would look out for. Because the thing is too, if you've got somebody who's really connected to themselves, has a genuine felt experience of life, they wouldn't invalidate your feelings to begin with. There'd be a certain level of empathy there and respect there, because they know how they want to be treated. They want to be treated like that, so they will treat you like that. It's only people who are disconnected from themselves, who think things should look a certain way, who will tell you how you should be feeling in certain situations. So there's a big difference, but it takes time to understand those differences. I'm still on that path, because there's quite a bit of healing on this path too, and forgiveness, self-forgiveness and forgiveness. So it's tricky, it takes a bit of time. But at the same time, I wanted to do this podcast because I wanted to point out that there's nothing wrong with you. if you have serious feelings or if some people around you are telling you you're too serious. Nothing wrong with you. I think it actually makes you more serious when you either resist against those people. So you'll say things to yourself like, I'm not serious, they're the problem. Or if you try to change yourself. When you start trying to change yourself, it will come off as, authentic to other people anyway. It will come off a bit forced. It'll be like forced happiness, forced joy. Because that was the other thing I always struggled with, was that whenever I gave in to the people and I'd force myself to feel happy, well, the first negative thing, perhaps the most negative thing, is the effect it has on your self-esteem. Because when you invalidate your experience and you choose to agree with the person who's invalidating it, your self-esteem has to take a blow there. So you're leaving yourself open to that happening even more so. So it's those small little choices you have day to day. They have a huge impact on your self-esteem and self-confidence and self-worth. So you're sacrificing your self-esteem, and then the next part is that because you're faking it, you haven't a lot of power either to interact with other people, because you're letting them pretty much throw you around to their own whims, you're giving them way too much power, other people too much power. So it's much better to not invalidate your experience and some people not accepting you for that, because you don't want their acceptance anyway, because it's conditional. The people who will genuinely accept you, the people you want acceptance from, are the people where there's no strings attached, because that's the type of energy you're giving out too. It's unconditional acceptance of other people, because that's what you want from other people. So it's what you put out. The principle of what you put out is what you want to get back. To keep that in mind. So that's the main things I wanted to cover today. It's a topic that I'm glad I spoke about. I didn't know I was going to talk about. I'm just glad I have some words to talk about it today, because it's a tricky experience. At the same time as well, like, I want to have good relations with people, even if they see things differently to me. For me, the most important thing is respect. Once there's an underlying level of respect with somebody, I'll get on with somebody. But if there's a lack of respect, if they feel like they can tell me what to do or how to behave, then that relationship is never going to go anywhere. It's not really a relationship. It's just, I don't know what it is. It's a dysfunctional kind of thing, anyway. But I just wanted to talk about that today. That's the podcast for today. If you enjoyed today's podcast, give a rating and a review. I greatly appreciate it. It helps the podcast to grow. And that's it. Thanks again for listening, and I will speak to you on the next episode.